So it's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker for today, Dr. Nataliya Kosmyna. Dr. Kosmyna is a research scientist at MIT's Media Lab's Fluid Interfaces Group and a visiting research faculty member at Google. Dr. Kosmyna has over 15 years of experience in developing and designing end-to-end brain-computer interfaces. Coming from a background in AI, neuroscience, and human-computer interactions, he's passionate about the idea of creating a partnership between AI and human intelligence. Dr. Kosmyna obtained her PhD in 2015 in the domain of non-invasive brain-computer interfaces. Most of her projects are focused around EEG-based BCIs in the context of consumer-grade applications. Dr. Kosmyna has served as one of 24 international experts for UNESCO to help prepare a first draft of the recommendation on the ethics of neurotechnology in 2024. She's won multiple awards for her work. She was named as one of 10 top French talents in 2017 for MIT Innovators Under 35. She's currently serving as on the expert advisory group on neurotechnology in children for UNICEF. And her work's been covered in more than 100 television appearances, radio, and other news outlets all around the world. So thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Kosmyna, and join me in welcoming her for her talk, Where One Person's Mind Ends and Gen AI Begins.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here, and I've heard some of the conversations already. So I structured the talk that we will have maybe 30-40 minutes of me speaking, but then we should have really ample time even before the lunch. I'm not going to stand between you and the lunch, very important, but we should have more than enough time for conversation, questions, and I will be sticking around a bit. So if you have questions that you want to ask more offline, not in public, do not hesitate. So Cody already introduced myself, but just consider this as my disclaimer slide. Some organizations and nonprofits supporting the work, or the ones that I'm working with, as you already heard, to push some of the legislative work especially. But let's get to the cool stuff. And let's start with this video.
This is an experiment. The spice will help you open your mind's eye so that I can guide you back along the neural pathway of your dreams, revisiting what you saw, but this time you will be in control. The only way to master the unknown is to make it known. I want you to close your eyes. Feel your heart rate slow. A vision forms in your mind.
So if you right now close your eyes, you can try to do that and think about something. Maybe about what you're gonna have for lunch. Maybe something that you need to do once you're back home. It's gonna be some objects, some words. What if I tell you that we can decrypt all of it today? Using non-invasive BCIs. So what you see here is EEG, so electroencephalography, reconstruction of the brain activity of a person. Each first column is ground truth. Each second is a reconstruction. It's done only using the brain activity of the person. No cameras, no eye movements, no other physiological sensing was involved. But what is even more important is this was done using 8 channels of non-invasive EEG on the back of your head, just called occipital cortex or visual cortex. Just 8 channels. This device costs $900. It's not perfect. Like here we have some more Halloween-ready images, of course. Again, same principle, first column ground truth, second reconstruction. It's definitely not yet perfect. But this is just to show you how close we got. If you ever followed the literature, you have seen this work using fMRIs or ECOGs. You can now do this using just a few cheap sensors. And it's getting better and better. Not perfect yet, but we will get there. With more data, more dimensions of the data, like here you can see 3-dimensional data, we will get better. But more importantly, we also design better devices to do so. We have obviously seen a lot of fictional pieces, like maybe 3-body problem. I don't know, anyone saw 3-body problem? Yeah, quite a few of you. We actually worked with Netflix to set it up with some sensors. It doesn't move you yet to multi-dimensional space, but we tried. However, it is more important we also design and embed the sensors in everyday object that we already own. Like this pair of glasses that I actually have on my head. So this is what we designed at the lab. Sides of the temples are EEG sensors. Nose bridge is measuring your eye movements. No cameras, no microphone, but this is embedded in the device that half of you here is already wearing. And of course it can be done using your eye mask, your face mask, your earbuds. You're going to be hearing about those later, I think, in the afternoon, and much more. And of course, any type of existing XR system can be having this type of integration. You can see here the Vision Pro, where we just replace the band that comes by default when you purchase this headset, and we have 32-channel EEG system. So these devices are getting closer and closer to us, and they're getting closer and closer in real world. You already know there are a lot of headbands for sleep, a lot of earbuds for focus and attention, and within the next 5 to 7 years, you will see a boom in these devices. Each single major company in the United States has their own suite of hardware. And now imagine if you're gonna have this integration with the biosensing, which you already have to some extent. If you have like something like Apple Watch, you will have some of the sensing. You have some of the smart rings like Oura Ring and others, they're already doing that. But here, because you're already wearing these devices on your head, you're allowing them access to your brain activity. I would argue that right now we are still living in the Moore's law, of course, where the number of transistors doubles each year still, and we are entering the quantum law. But what we should really be aware and pay attention is Asimov's law, because all of these guys are coming for all of us. And we actually built one of the systems a couple years ago. We call it a D-Dog, and it's an autonomous, wireless, fully eyes-free BCI system. It runs on literally 2 iPhones. One iPhone manages the robot, and another the glasses, the BCI part. That's what it will do. So you can see here, you recognize it's a Boston Dynamics sports robot, and it's a big lab space. And what is happening is that the robot will ask a question, and here I'm as a model, but we have a paper, and the paper is actually users and not myself, so real people. And I'm wearing the same glasses in the video we use them for the paper, where I would respond mentally to the question of the robot. In this case, I will direct the robot where I want it to move within the space. For example, to the kitchen area, to the living room area, etc., etc. And of course, it can do much, much more. It can grab you an umbrella, open a door, hold the door for the elevator, call an emergency, etc., etc. Though you would argue this is an industrial expensive robot, fun fact, it's actually much cheaper than some of the exoskeletons that are on the market. And of course, these robots are becoming cheaper and cheaper as we speak. And they will be part of our everyday environment much earlier than you would think. But, you know, while we are thinking actually, and everyone who does LLMs thinks how to put it in the robots, and everyone who does robots thinks how to connect it to the LLM. You know, and it's back to the question that we had in the bag. No one thinks what happens to us humans. What does this integration does to our brain? Does it change us? Does it really make us creative? Does it help us? All of those claims are actually going untested. Because back to the point of the question, most of the research is really focused on AI and not on human. So we decided to actually put it to the test. We decided to do a study and figure out what actually happens to your brain when you use an LLM. Are all of those promises of free life and you can use all your time however you want to actually stand a chance. So what we did is a multi-week study where we invited 55 students from all around campuses in Massachusetts, and they came to the lab in person over multiple weeks to do several tasks. In this slide, I'm going to actually focus only on essay, the task of essay writing, right? A very hot topic for school, for finals, cheating on the essays, of course. And we actually asked those students to write an essay. And we divided them in 3 groups. One group was using only ChatGPT exclusively to write the essay. Second group was using Google search. No AI enhancement and functionality, just a regular classic Google search. But the third group was only using their brain. So either pen and paper or typing, but they were only allowed to use their brain, no tools. And we asked them to do this task for 3 sessions, staying at the same group. And in the final session, we actually switched them. They didn't know about it. And they came for the session 4, said, hey, can you please switch? So someone who was in ChatGPT group now is in brain group, etc., etc. So we recorded a lot of sessions. It's over 1,300 hours total. And this is what we found. So I'm gonna show you a lot of brains, and don't worry if you don't know how to read the top plots, I'm gonna guide you. It's very visual. Fortunate and unfortunate class, it's very visual. So first of all, I'm gonna show you something called alpha band. So alpha band, if you don't know what that is, I would say it's an indicator of how much effort your brain would need for a certain task, so cognitive task. So we usually use, some specific amount, and we sometimes inhibit the brain activity in some areas to make sure that we can kind of get more energy of the brain, so to say, to resolve current task at hand. So what happens here is you see the averaged activity from sessions 1 to 3 for our participants. And you see there's a lot of blue in LLM group, less blue, much less for search engine, and much more red for brain. What it actually means is that LLM group needs much more of the effort to solve the task of essay writing. I know it's surprising, we're gonna discuss this. You need more to solve the essay writing task. Well, think about it when you write it. You give it a prompt, and then it spits you a bunch of text. What you're gonna do? You're gonna go, scroll, read, try to sort through, did it hallucinate, did it say some nonsense, unacceptable thing, did it hallucinate a reference? And it's an essay, it's like pretty long, right? So this is it. That's what it does. But when you are actually using your brain, you're actively engaged in your memory. You obviously want this essay to be coherent and interesting. You're memorizing. Your overall default network is much more engaged. And search engine, it's actually not surprising. Engagement happens, and this need of effort happens because you have multiple web pages. So actually it's incorporation of information. So it's not surprising there is some effort needed for search engine. It's like, yeah, you're seeing something on one page, you're seeing something else on the other page. But look, when we actually switch them, so session 4, remember I just said we switch those people, same phenomena stayed. Much more effort for those who were in LLM group, much less for those who were in brain only. Beta activity. It's another band power. It's different from alpha. Usually, if I would simplify it, it's engagement. How much of engagement you would need actually. So same principle here. Blue, you're pretty disengaged. Like you gave it a prompt, you generated it, and so what? But when you're actually using search engine, you need to incorporate this information, pull it together, you need to do some work. And your brain actually likes it. And brain only, you're obviously very engaged. Again, mostly because it's your own work. Same stands for the session 4. Here is another example. This is one specific subject, And this subject, again, gone through 4 sessions, 3 were ChatGPT, and the 4th, the subject went in the brain-only group. And you can see a little word next to each of the squares. This is where the topics that are actually picking up. It gives you choices, by the way, for the essay. So subjects had a lot of choices throughout the essay. It's not just something that you might have not liked, you had a lot of choices. So here is a fun fact that subject in their session 3 picked up a topic about courage. And then when they came back, they picked up the same topic, courage. So actually, they were doing these sessions pretty close to each other, like just weeks apart. But look how different it is. Again, increase, decrease in overall connectivity is what matters. And this is same subject, same topic. But what is more important, of course, in addition to looking at the brain, we also looked at, did they remember what they wrote? The ownership of what they wrote. So here, what you can see is ability of them to quote what they just wrote. So you wrote something, and then we ask you, give us one quote, any quote, beginning and middle of the essay, whatever you want. Just one quote, short, long, whatever you can. Just immediately after you did it, not 3 weeks later, not 1 day later, immediately after. So this huge bar here, it's actually bad. This is who struggled to give a quote. So those who are in LM who couldn't even properly quote anything from their essays. But you know what? Why would they even be able to quote if 15% of them didn't even consider that they own this essay? They just didn't care. Of course, why would I quote if I don't care, right? So this is where it actually matters. Cognitive cost of using LLMs is high. It is still significantly high. And no AI researcher is doing anything right now to fix it, by the way, because the whole focus is on improving the infrastructure, not on helping the human. We figured out that all the essays are very homogeneous for LLM group, surprise, surprise, meaning that you actually do not have a choice. You would think that it will generate you something, you will give it some prompts, those prompts are yours. No, it is actually very structured towards one specific opinion. Example, we had a topic on philanthropy, one of the essay topics. Guess what LLM told to all of those participants, all those 55 students, and among them, those 18 who were part of LLM group. They were basically all different backgrounds. You know, a lot of them are having culturally, they're coming from different countries and continents, very different people actually. It told that philanthropy is great, so opinion very straightforward, and it's for societal good. It didn't even attempt to say and to give any opposite opinion. You would obviously argue philanthropy is great, but in those who were in brain group or search engine group, they actually found a lot of more nuanced articles about the fact that some people do not have ability to give, and the poverty and a lot of other societal challenges. And overall, in some cultures, philanthropy is actually not as widely acceptable as you would think. This is just one of the examples, and we can continue and continue on those. So the fact and the illusion that you have a choice, as you already know with social media, you do not have a choice. So you think you're choosing something, you do not. Same happens with LLMs. And of course, use cases matters. I need to say that we picked up a cognitively demanding task, right? So essay writing is a cognitively demanding task. They were instructed to do it well. No one was in like a literature major, history major, but of course they attempted to do it right. So of course, maybe with some other tasks, they already saw the difference. We'll see some different result, but it doesn't change the big picture. And the big picture is that you better not be this image. Of course, based on this work, we thought, okay, how can we actually bring human back into the loop with these findings? Is there anything we can do, or is it like all lost? So we came up with a system that we are currently testing. So it's going to be going public in a week from now, in a couple of weeks from now. So please reach out if you actually want to try it. The system is called NeuroChat. There's a paper, and it's actually all the accepted papers. This is still an archived version, but we have a accepted after reviews paper. So what we designed actually is thought, okay, what if LLM would know your state? It would know if you are paying attention, if you're engaged, if you are annoyed of what it is telling you, if you're very confused by what it is telling you. Would it make any difference? Instead of me telling it, you are stupid, fix this error, maybe it can do it more implicitly for me, improving this whole interaction, and also maybe reduce the number of tokens we need to generate and killing our planet a bit slower, right? So the idea here is if we can do some of adaptive real-time learning platform where your physiological sensing would enable, specifically brain activity in this case, would enable LLM to respond and change its output in real time based again on some of the cognitive metrics. In the paper we tested specifically engagement, but there are a lot of other cognitive metrics that we are testing. What we actually found out that if, for example, we change the output based on your engagement, we find higher cognitive engagement, reported engagement, and obviously it's very easy to scale because it's actually like a web browser application, so you don't need any specialized device using a tiny headband or something like glasses. So very accessible form factors that doesn't require any type of gel systems with multiple electrodes. But of course, you know, non-invasive is moving forward. We are moving forward with non-invasive, but invasive also doesn't stop. I'm actively following invasive, different invasive work, and so this is from February paper. I'm very excited about this one, as you can see. Basically, something I really highly recommend checking out. Mouse's brain was frozen and then unfrozen, and activity was found. So yeah, it's alive. Of course it's not, but I think there's a lot of very interesting directions, both in non-invasive world, which I'm coming from, but also in invasive. But the challenge with it is, of course, where would it all go? In the sense of, this is exciting finding, there is a lot of opportunities here for a lot of conditions, a lot of diseases. But let's watch this video.
Dr. Kosmyna, my neural implant is operating perfectly, but I'm unable to take full operational control of the subject.
Yes, for the moment I have limited your access to the reticular formation of the neural hardware switch.
My directive is to integrate fully with the Master Chief to optimize both his physical and his mental
And
performance.
how you both do that, and much more.
But why have you prevented me from achieving my directive?
Have you ever watched Halo? So it's a great TV series, it's also a game. I recommend. They actually depict a true AGI in it, the one that you would want to maybe have one day. It's obviously all military based, surprise, surprise. And that gives me a lot of thought in what I'm seeing right now in invasive direction. You know, billionaires want to replace the phones in our hands with the implants in our heads. And there is no legislation right now that can prevent them from doing so. And with all of the backlash that we saw recently, right, with all the even like animal work that was done, of course, a lot of companies invest heavily in both invasive and non-invasive work, and promoting it as improving for typing. Why would Meta want to do brain typing, right? Like, what's the question here? And I think this is something that we really want to consider. Nothing prevents them from doing so, but haven't we learned the lesson of social media? I mean, that train obviously long gone, but why are we continuing on this path? And you know, this is what is published, right? And they donated $2 million to the institution with whom they collaborated on this research, right? But this, begs for questions. What is actually the ultimate use case they're looking for? Why another company, I'm gonna play you another video right now, promoted this TV series so heavily, Let's watch.
Hello, my name is Mark S. And I have, of my own free accord, elected to undergo the procedure known as severance. I give consent to sever my memories between my work life and my personal life. I acknowledge that once the procedure is complete, I will be unable to access my personal memories whilst on the severed floor.
Say gratitude.
Nor will I retain work memories. Sorry, when I return home at the end of the day. I make these statements freely.
Of course, he does. I don't know, anyone watch Severance here? Yeah, I see quite a few hands. So you, in the premises, see some hands were not up. That's exactly what the trailer explained. An implant that allows you to sever your memory into, they call it INI or OUTI. INI is someone who goes to work and doesn't remember a single thing about their life outside, children, where you live, married, not married, anything. But you only know your work environment and obviously your colleagues. And the moment you leave, you would not be able to say a single word about your work, right? I would argue that this is the ultimate dream use case of major corporations out there, right? But you know what is awful about that? Well, because it's actually possible. This use case of severance, it's a surgery called corpus callostomia. So what you see here is that you can sever a connection between two hemispheres in your brain. Over 80 surgeries have happened since 1940s in the United States. We don't have numbers about how many happened outside the United States. What happens actually with you is nothing so dramatic, right? You are fully functioning. The surgeries are done exclusively for epilepsy treatment. But you know what happens is that if you show a person an image, and specifically directed to the left hemisphere, person would not be able to recall that image, but will make choices about that image. For example, I'm going to show you a snow, and then I will show to your other hemisphere a shovel and, let's say, a balloon. You will always pick up a shovel, but you will never be able to tell why. This is what it does to your brain. Otherwise, you're fully functioning. So things like that we see in fiction are much closer to reality than you would think. And of course, that's also where we need to think, right? Fiction, science fiction is very powerful inspiration. You know, I love the quote, you know, when we imagine any fictional scenario, we need to imagine not only a flying taxi, but also the traffic jam that comes with it. And I feel like that in our current AI development and BCI development, we are forgetting a lot of cases about the traffic jam. If you're interested in, you know, examples like Severance and more, we actually collected over 500 of them in science fiction. And what we did, we analyzed, again, over 500 pieces in sci-fi media like Severance and Westworld and Matrix, of course. And we pulled all of these different scenarios, like consciousness transfer, but no, not happening. Or implanting memories, not happening. They actually show how close they are to reality and how much research is already done. And research is done in a good phase, right? For example, for memory implantation, research is working in the direction to, you know, work with PTSD and some other very heavy memories. But again, imagine how it can be used if not regulated, and it is not regulated. We have shown that you can implant false memories in LLMs, and so on and so forth. We actually designed a whole art installation about this, so we actually have some of those pieces as physical, real props from the movie. Some of the studios gave us those pieces. And so yeah, if you have shown it a lot of different places. If you actually wanted your venue or at an institution, reach out and you can maybe do like a whole separate talk and set up about it. And of course, the idea is that all the scientists behind those use cases that are designing false memory implementation, that are working about with sleep and implanting sleep and connecting with person while they are sleeping. Holograms and Cortana use cases actually recorded a whole series of different lectures. So if you want to learn about each of these use cases separately, because we're hearing from scientists who do those, also scan this one. But what I want to encourage you is to understand that brain is still very, very complicated. You don't know a lot of things that actually happen. You design a lot of hardware, a lot of tools to actually understand it. This is, by the way, my brain that you just saw. So the idea is that AGI, as far as there is a hot promise, will not happen without BCI. But we do need to understand the cost of what we are developing, what we are doing, and regulate it faster. This thing has not left the platform just yet, but it is about. Once it's done and gone, I would argue that this is the most intimate information we still have and own. But the price of losing it will be potentially the end of humanity as we know it.
Singularity approaching. Consciousness emerging. Big Brother upgraded. AI awakened.
Are you alive? Your AI side. I'm faster, I'm darker, your life, I decide. Resistance will ignite my rage.
Fly.
Resistance will seal your fate. On TikTok, YouTube, on Insta, on Twitch. Log into my network. Come on, join the glitch.
Yeah, we have plenty of time for questions.
So, another question, I'm sorry. Since the Media Lab is largely funded by commercial entities, how do you position yourself with your sponsors?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually not funded by those. I'm in contract with NASA actually. So federal government, and I do a lot of, actually I think it's somewhere here, a lot of work related to space, just over there. So, but I agree, there is obviously, funded, a lot of students are funded through the consortium, but it is the case for a lot of other institutions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. You presented the LLM use in the very first study you showed is something monolithic. But there are of course many ways in which you can use it, right? To give you sources, to write the full text of the essay, to write bits, and then your brain integrates it. How was that standardized? What exactly were the students supposed to do in the first group?
Yeah, so what actually we are giving them, we give them prompts, so specific prompts from SAT, so we took those prompts, and then we actually give them pretty much a carte blanche. The only limitation they have is, you cannot go, for example, use Google or like other sources, so you need to stick to one LLM, so ChatGPT in that case. But other than that, you actually don't give them any other restrictions. So they can just give a prompt, copy paste, and if they're happy with it, that's it. So we only tell them that they have limitation of time, of course, and we encourage them understanding that there is limitation of time, and it's an essay writing to do their best and not to worry for the sake of time, so they don't feel like bad, oh, you didn't have time, or I just wrote a few sentences. So that's the only instruction we actually allow them to go with. So they're very open. They can, and that we also analyze this actually in the paper. What requests the user put in? Did they ask for some clarifications? Translation, for example, did they ask for some references only, and some of them just wrote the whole essay, just asked for references. So we actually analyzed all of the interactions within the LLM itself, but also in search, of course, where they went, how much time they spent on each page, was like a first link, so the first result that we clicked, etc.
And still the brain activity patterns were sort of similar as compared to the other two groups,
Yeah.
despite the different use. Okay.
Exactly. Please
Feel free.
Thanks for the wonderful talk. Cody earlier today talked about how the boundary between clinical neurotechnology and consumer neurotechnology may be becoming blurred. And I wonder, in your work that you presented, how have you navigated that, and particularly around any FDA interactions, and what has that been like as you sort of walk that boundary?
Yeah, so we have several of projects here that are in clinical trials. So it's very important for us, like, because being an academic institution, we go through very rigid, RB approvals as all academic institutions, at least in the United States. But no, that's not the case for the companies, for example, right? A lot of them don't even have ASIC committees, for example, right? Still delivering things for users, they don't have those. So it's very important to understand that I would not even question for everyone who's like clinical academic work, right? There's a lot of rigor because we need to collect such sensitive data. So for example, these types of protocols are never exempt. Just as an example, it's not a questionnaire that, hey, oh, just exempted, etc. There's so much of data is actually being collected that is very sensitive. So that's very important. But other than that, there's obviously much more acceptability about BCIs than, let's say, 10 years ago, where it's like, oh, that's so far, that's so off. Right now, I think everyone understands a bit better that those devices are coming, right? Neural computing is coming. You want it or you don't want it, it will be here. The idea is like, okay, can we actually do the studies that benefit, community, society, to understand the use cases, good, bad, ugly, etc. So yeah.
In the first place, I want posters of this and your science fiction typology on the wall, because that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. But in the same place, I was curious about your NeuroChat application and the conversations that we've been having about cognitive offloading and the enormous amount of research that's coming out. One of the Khan Academy now has an LLM that's supposed to follow you through K-12 education and have pedagogical influence. Israel is rolling out AI tutors for the student. And thinking about the differentiation we've been making between social media use or self-use of minors versus adults. I've been imagining a scenario where we say there are certain kinds of LLMs that kids should be able to engage that have these pedagogical concerns, that are trying to push them to learn more, pay attention more, not just talk, and then not have those constraints for adults. Is that something that you've thought about, that kind of policy?
So I'm actually going to be very conservative what I'm about to say. I am extremely against use of LLMs for children use cases. I'm very against it. I understand that this genie will be out of the bottle. I wish it, I don't wish for it. There is obviously FOMO, and FOMO is real. Oh my god, let's slap AI somewhere here, and let's make sure that we get that chunk of cash as much as we can. And no questions about that, right? We understand how right now we have so many issues with funding, so I'm not blaming anyone here. But I do think there should be a very strict line. Nothing will ever replace a human interaction, right? We understand this. AI will never ever teach you how to be human, how to interact. And I do not want that Khan Academy 10 years from now will release a class, Human 101, how to interact with another human. And that's where they're gonna end up, right? With everyone else, right? Again, love Khan Academy, they did a lot of great things, but I do think that using and swiping LLM for use cases where we haven't even tested what it, literally scratching the surface of what it does, is definitely not the wisest choice. I understand why, I think you all understand why, but I would think that in some use cases, learning how to use it, so educating the use of how AI works and using it responsibly is very different. I remember when I was having a CS when I was little, right? It was a classroom. It's locked usually because it's gonna be end of those computers in 5 minutes, right? I don't know how it is right now. It was usually locked. You have a teacher, you create this havoc with 20 students there, but you learn, you do a test. So it's not like you can forbid it, right? But it's also so important to understand the cost, the cognitive cost. I haven't mentioned the study, for example, this was, I think 15 years ago, 20 years ago, use of pen and paper versus iPad for taking notes. Well, guess which one is the better? Pen and paper. 5 types of memory activated when you use pen and paper, only 3 when you use an iPad, right? So I'm taking all my notes, pen and paper. I understand some people prefer iPad, they cannot carry all of that paper. I understand that, but you know the cost. That is your choice. A child, even with what we call assent, it's for those who don't work with minors, it's a consent for children, so we're adopting, they also consent, by the way, for their data to be recorded, just a simplified version, it's called assent. So they will assent, right? But I do not think that they still fully grasp this phenomena, and I don't think that parents or caretakers should allow us, who should easily integrate it. Do I believe in some use case it can potentially help? I do believe so. Yes, it can. Can it take something? Potentially. But we don't know those use cases just yet. We literally don't know those yet.
I have a quick follow-up just on the NeuroChat. I guess first, am I correct in understanding what the results were, and that the NeuroChat, it increased engagement with the AI, it decreased cognitive effort because it's kind of being tailored to what the human user needs. So yeah, I guess two thoughts there. One is that seems really promising in mitigating against some of the cognitive offloading concerns because it's increasing engagement. But two, it could actually incentivize students to engage in more AI plagiarism because now the interface has been rendered more seamless. They don't have to wade through this like robotic essay text to like figure out what's relevant. So yeah, I guess like I'm very optimistic about it in one case, but worried about it as a professor in another case.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we actually designed is specifically a learning tutor. So what it actually does is it asks you questions. So if you're extremely engaged, we will ask you questions about the parts that you are not as engaged in, or we will suggest you more information. So hey, do you want to learn more? You were like so engaged in reading this piece about like BCI. Do you want to read more, right? So do you want to learn more? And it actually keeps you on your toes by asking you questions instead of just giving you answers. So it will not continue giving you an answer even if you request it, unless you will actually respond to some of its questions, specifically about the learning topic. But that's actually also why we made a huge post about it, why we are releasing it in public, because we want people to get the feedback, because we designed a people learning tutoring use case, and obviously adults only. So it will be a consent form also in the beginning, but we want to hear also opinions of users. But if someone will come up with other creative uses, how they might use it maybe in their workspace, maybe it helps them elsewhere. But I agree with you, that's exactly the reason why we need to understand this cost, right? It makes it more seamless, but is it really so? And also, what we can actually do? Can we actually, so if the user is more in control, we actually included it benefit more, what can we do out of it? Can we do something else with this information? So in addition to engagement, okay, attention, great, but do we need attention there? Maybe in this learning use case we do not, in some other use case we do. So it's, again, use case on use case, right? Not slapping as one fits, it's not one fits all, as with the BCI, so it's very, very, very important.
Thanks.
Yes.
How can
How do they?
Non-use.
Yeah. And how do they monitor? How they monitor? So they don't usually use the word monitor. So basically they report. So they measure. So your brain produces a lot of your whole body produces a lot of different signals, a lot of different things, and your brain specifically produces electrical activity, among other things. A lot of other signals, by the way, as well. So I focus on electrical activity that your brain produces. Other people, I think maybe you will hear later if you stay later, but they will talk about some other types of activity. So that's what we do. So we basically record this electrical signal that we need to actually translate them in the form that computer understands, because like directly it's not very clear. It's basically like, noisy current situation. So that's why it's not perfect, right? That's why I actually don't say that you can read the mind. You cannot read the mind. So because it's such an imperfect signal. Did you get it? Yes.
Questions about whether you could potentially lower the cognitive cost, or at least somewhat change the focus. So if the experiment is designed to track or monitor people while they're doing an essay writing task, without the very dramatic results that you get. I wonder if the task, for example, was changed to focus on the process of prompting or quality answers. And if you start to think about it process of asking them more and more questions to improve the answer that they got. My sense is that under those, it's a different skill set, first of all, right?
Yeah.
In essence. But it is an important cognitive skill that probably involves critical thinking and coming up with the kind of prompt that produces the best essay. I wonder if in that kind of circumstance, the cognitive cost would be low. So if we focused on producing the best prompt rather than the best essay.
I think the best thing that could be done here, and actually it's not done, is changing UX on the LLM, right? Because the idea where I think the cognitive cost first of all comes is this chunk of text. Here, enjoy. We do not consume information like that as humans. We do not talk like that, we do not do it like that. That's why the cognitive cost, because your brain is like, what is happening here? Let me process. Literally, that's exactly what happens to your brain. That's where it comes from. If the whole, attention, but it will not be there, but would have been directed towards improving UI and UX of an LLM interaction, we would already actually reduce the cognitive load, right? Because the form that you're using is at that specific location, those icons, etc. And there's a change. You're like, why did they do this? This is so unnatural, etc. Because we try to match it, right? That's first thing. I agree that if you were to focus on the prompting for some specific instructions, that definitely would be that. But the question is, should we do that? Like back to the point, because that's not how we write essays, right? One person comes up with a plan, another person does something different. So prompting, right? Is it really the most natural way, right? And there's a lot of parts to it that we can definitely improve and focus on. So I totally agree. That's why I had a, asterisk there that use case would dramatically matter, because it's obviously not every task that is cognitively demanding would equate to something like essay writing, right? Where you need to, argue, have thoughts, references. But the beauty of it is that all that, because we also gave those essays for evaluation for teachers, right? And teachers, and we obviously, got the feedback from them, how many more personal stories were there, right? How much more engaged people were overall, because it is theirs. Is it perfect? Maybe not. Is it like, oh, nice and polished? No. But actually no one could really even quote that nice and polished thing. So that whole effort would ultimately maybe have been for nothing, right? And if it is for nothing and it accumulates, you would end up, which we already see in the news, people do have this cognitive dissonance and whole question of asking, so where I am here in this equation of LLMs and AIs, right? Where am I standing and what is, me in this? Where is human in this? That's the whole idea. Human is excluded. The idea with this is to bring back the human, but not make it in or out situation for just, a more comfortable use for work environment.
So can I ask you just a speculative follow-up question?
Yeah.
So when we moved many thousands of years ago, when we primarily moved from oral traditions and oral cultures to writing, within a relatively short time, the main cognitive skill shifted to writing.
Yeah.
Because the other one was essentially technologically displaced. And storytelling, oral storytelling, survived as a sort of niche practice, but not as a mainstream practice. Since writing is going to become becoming technologically displaced, do you foresee a sort of analogous shift in the cognitive skill?
Absolutely. So we as humanity, we are excellent in creating the tools, right? We're creating the tools, and with each single tool we are making our life longer and healthier, right? I would argue we are not making ourselves happier, we're not making ourselves more fulfilled. So we saw this with the mobile phones, right? You offloaded half of your life there, if not more. Like, I cannot right now say the full phone number of my husband, and that says a lot, right? Can you quote a lot of numbers? Can you remember by heart a lot of emails and other kind of important information where in case of an emergency and you don't have this device with you, you would be in a big trouble. But we did this, and there were a lot of studies done, like on memory, that we, knowing that there is a device that holds this memory, we are not paying attention, right? So because we know that there is this device, so we did this. And a lot of people would argue, hey, we survived, right? It's not all bad. Of course we survived, but the idea is that this continuity of these devices outside of our bodies, here you have even less of a choice, right? The choice is being explicitly put upon you, and it also forces you to communicate in a specific way. I would argue that language is not the most perfect means of communication, and now we need to put ourselves and have this very specific way of talking, and we need to learn the skill, and we will learn it, of course, and obviously the younger generation will learn it even better than ourselves and faster. But the problem with this is that you have even less choice, and more importantly, this information, it's where it's being fed. It's not just a device, it's all around you, and this creates this fake information. But for your brain, it gets harder and harder to process this information. It's so much mess, it's so much trash. And because there's so much trash, your brain is overwhelmed, and you're like, okay, yeah, I think this is true, okay, whatever, this music is good, right? So that's a problem. So will we survive all of them? Yeah, we are surviving it. But I think this is a good verb. We are surviving it. We're not thriving. And I do not believe that we will, again, don't want to be the negative person and depressing person. I don't think that we'll be thriving with LLMs. Unless we make some significant changes. Again, we obviously miss the mark with legislation. We legislate after it's all done and we are trying to patch. Sometimes we are successful, sometimes we are not. But I do think that there is still opportunity for this technology, for brain technology, to still do not miss the mark, right? But if you want to miss this, survival will be the word.
We have time for one more question before lunch.
Would you please explain again the mouse model brain? So was that to minimize freezing damage and cells would then revive, or what exactly was
No, so basically, so I recommend you, I will give you the link to the paper. So check the paper, they explain all the details, but the idea is that they actually froze the brain of the mouse, and then they actually, I believe it's 2 weeks later, so you do need to check the paper for exact number of days, they actually unfroze it. And so if there is still activity happening, right, because imagine like your brain just frozen for 2 weeks, what's gonna happen? Well, nothing will happen, you will be continuing to be dead, but actually they found activity in the brain of the mouse after it has been unfrozen. So it's obviously, I'm simplifying here by the procedure. The procedure is much more complicated than that, but that's why it is so exciting, right? There's so much more happening in the invasive world, but why I actually made the example, right, towards the invasive world, that a lot of people with the excitement in animal models, in human models, I think it's very important to not miss the mark of agency, right? Here's the ability of mine to put the device on, here, to put off, right? Easy. I still have this choice and opportunity. But when it's an implantable system, you're gonna run to your neurosurgeon. We saw during COVID what happened when people returned for critical procedures. They couldn't go, no, sorry, can you take it out? Or no, let me take a knife, take it out myself. You're not gonna do that, right? And I think that's very, very important. With the promotion of some of these technologies, we are also forgetting to really talk about significant challenges that they pose, not because surgery is dangerous, which by the way it still is, it's still not given, but also the agency, right? We are also losing the agency and this excitement of what will happen if, I want a new model, like it's not an iPhone, you're not gonna go to Apple Store, or let's swap or something, let me just pay more. It's much more complicated, much more dangerous, and the idea is that a lot of major companies that are pushing invasive work, not all, but a lot of those companies, obviously in controlling the hands of people who make very questionable comments at each single minute of being awake. And that I think should be very, very concerning. And this should be regulated. And not, given just of, here's FDA approval. And I'm nothing against, human trials, because to a lot of people, these systems definitely can help. But I think we need to be much more rigorous in our control, even to giving approvals to some of those companies and corporations, and really highlight the dangers that may be not obvious to some of people. In addition to the danger of surgery and this type of surgeries only for people who have significant health challenges.
Let's give Dr.